I knew something was wrong the moment the key refused to turn. It was a Monday morning in late January, the kind that clings to your skin like fog. Camden Hollow was still waking up mist, rolling low over the hedgerows. Everything muffled like the world itself had gone quiet for morning. I was still in the same jeans I'd worn for 2 days, still holding the overnight bag I'd packed, when Corbin collapsed in the kitchen. My hands were cracked from hospital soap, my eyes swollen from crying. In my left hand, a wilted bouquet from the nurses at St. Joseph's. In my right, the key to the house we bought together, or used to be mine. I stepped onto the porch, the wood cold beneath my boots, and slid the key into the lock. It jammed. I pulled it out, tried again. Nothing. That's when I noticed the curtain's thick velvet ugly floral print. Not the white linens I'd hemmed myself. My stomach dropped. I pressed my face closer. Through the slit in the drapes, I saw boxes stacked high, a pink throw pillow on my reading chair. And then I saw her, Savannah Yu, drinking tea from the wedding china Corbin and I saved 3 years to buy. If you've ever come home to find your whole life replaced, leave a comment, I'm still here. And don't forget to subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories, so you never miss what happened after I turned back to the car. With something they didn't expect. The last time I saw Corbin alive, he was sleeping upright in a hospital chair, heart monitor clicking quietly beside him. His fingers were cold when I kissed them goodbye. I hadn't expected to return home alone. And I certainly hadn't expected to find myself locked out of the life I'd spent a decade helping him build. But Savannah had been waiting for that moment. I could see it in the way she folded her arms like a queen, reclaiming her estate. Lila hadn't even looked me in the eye when she lifted my dinner plates from the shelf. It was like I had died too, and no one sent me the memo. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, Corbin had come home from his office and told me the truth: the business was over. His tech startup had folded, investors pulled out, and the bank froze his accounts. He stood on the porch of this same house, running his hands through his hair, saying he didn't think we'd make the next mortgage payment. That night, I made a decision. Quietly, without telling him, I got dressed, drove to the Camden Hollow Credit Union, and started the refinance process. I used the nest egg I'd been saving since I quit interior design a decade earlier. Money no one knew I had. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just couldn't bear the look in his eyes when he thought he'd failed me. He never asked where the statements went. He was too busy trying to rebuild his self-worth. I kept the house afloat while he healed. I budgeted every dollar, fixed the leaky faucet, painted the hallway in spring tones he once said made him breathe easier. Savannah didn't know. She came down once or twice a year, always with the same attitude. Corbin, you were meant for more than this. This isn't New York. This isn't you. She'd sit in the guest room with the air conditioning blasting, sipping bitter wine, critiquing my floral curtains, and claiming Camden Hollow was too soft, too provincial. She never stayed long. Just long enough to remind us who she thought we should be. Corbin always smiled, told me after she left. She doesn't understand peace. I didn't want to fight her. Not then. Not even now. I just wanted to grieve in the only place that still smelled like him. Instead, she changed the locks. That evening, after standing on the porch for what felt like hours, I drove to a rundown motel off Highway 204. The walls reeked of bleach and mildew. The pillows were too flat and the curtains were yellowed with age. But it was mine for the night. I used Corbin's emergency card to check in. Room 3B, 1 queen bed. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid me the key and pointed to the vending machine that barely worked. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the bag I'd packed in a rush. A phone charger, a half-read book, the discharge papers from the hospital, and a voicemail. His last one. I played it once, then twice. By the third time, I didn't cry anymore. I just listened. Outside, the chapel bells of St. Francis rang 7 slow notes into the fog. And for the first time in over a decade, I drew a boundary. I picked up the phone and called the funeral home. A kind voice answered. St. Margaret's Memorial, this is Ruth speaking. Yes, I said slowly. This is Isolde Vance. I need to update the guest list for Corbin Drexler's service. Of course, ma'am. What changes would you like to make? I didn't hesitate. Please remove Savannah Yu and Lila Yu from the list. There was a pause on the other end, one of those silences, where someone wants to ask why, but knows not to. Understood, Ruth replied. I ended the call before she could say anything more. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about claiming my right to grieve without being erased. And somewhere in the silence of that tiny motel room, I felt it the first spark of something I hadn't felt in days. Control. Tuesday afternoon, I didn't go to the front door. I circled the block and parked behind the hedgerows that separated our backyard from the McKinley's place. Savannah's car wasn't in the driveway. Lila's either. The sun was high but cold, and the air smelled faintly of wet leaves and lavender air fresheners I'd never bought. The side door, the one that led from the laundry porch into the kitchen, had a faulty latch. Corbin had promised to fix it for months. He never did, and I never stopped knowing how to slide it open with the right pressure and angle. The house smelled different, not bad, just not mine. The photos I'd framed were gone from the hallway walls, replaced by generic landscape prints. The soft blue throw on the couch was now a mustard yellow I wouldn't have touched in a thrift store. Corbin's mug, always left on the end table, slightly chipped, filled with black tea, was gone. I didn't have time to mourn that. I moved through the house with purpose. Quiet, sharp, focused. The room I needed was tucked between the guest room and laundry, Corbin's office, or as Savannah once called it, his digital junkyard. She hated it. Called it cluttered, chaotic, unworthy of a Drexler. That's why I was sure she wouldn't touch it. I was right. The door creaked open, and I stepped into air that still held the faintest scent of his cologne. That cheap woodsy blend he'd worn since our first anniversary. The desk was still a mess, papers stacked in uneven columns, tech manuals, cords, receipts, business cards. I stood there for a moment, letting it wrap around me. Then I got to work. Top drawer, old utility bills, receipts from freelance projects. Middle drawer, flash drives, paper clips, a sticky note reminding him to reschedule his dental cleaning. Bottom drawer empty. Except for one thing. A slim black folder wedged behind two bulky instruction manuals. My breath caught before I even touched it. On the cover, in Corbin's handwriting, his unmistakable blocky all-capital scrawl, Postnup. Do not discard. We never had a prenup. We married in our 30s, broke but stubbornly in love. Corbin used to joke that paperwork was unromantic. If we need a contract, he'd say we've already lost the war. But a postnup. My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were 3 pages printed on clean legal letterhead dated just over 3 years ago. It listed both our full names, Isolde Vance and Corbin Drexler. The clauses were precise, unambiguous. A section was highlighted in yellow: in the event of the husband's passing, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, shall transfer in full to Isolde Vance unless otherwise overridden by a formal will. There was no will, not that anyone had found. But this was binding. At the very back of the folder, something fluttered loose. A folded piece of notebook paper torn from a spiral pad. 4 sentences written in dark ink, familiar and rushed. If you're reading this, something awful has happened. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep this safe, Iz. The Iz at the end knocked the air from my lungs. He hadn't called me that in years. Not since our New Orleans trip, when we got caught in the rain, soaked to the skin, laughing like teenagers. He'd shouted it across Bourbon Street like it was the most natural thing in the world. Iz. My knees buckled. I sat down in his chair. The worn leather still held the shape of his back. I read the letter again. Then again. Tears didn't come, not this time. What I felt wasn't grief, it was vindication. Corbin knew. He knew who his mother was, knew what she'd try, and in his own quiet, imperfect way, he had tried to protect me even if it was a posthumous shield. I folded the note and tucked it back into the folder. Then I slid it under my coat, zipped up tight, and walked out the same door I'd slipped through. That night I didn't sleep. But I didn't cry either. Instead, I stayed up rereading those 3 pages under the dim motel lamp until the words burned into my memory. By morning, I had called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Moira Lang, former roommate, now a real estate attorney, and the one person I trusted to help me take it all back. Wednesday arrived gray and hollow, the sky like a lid pressed too tight against Camden Hollow. The motel room reeked of instant coffee and old grief. I hadn't slept, but I'd stopped trembling. Moira had called me back at 7:12 a.m., calm as ever. Bring the folder, keep it close, say as little as possible. We'll go step by step. At 2:03 in the afternoon, there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp raps, not hesitant, not polite. I opened the curtain just slightly, and there she was. Savannah Yu, dressed in all black like she was attending an opera, not trespassing. Beside her stood a tall man in a gray wool coat, square jaw, clipboard wedding band, gleaming like he wanted you to notice it. Lawyer. I opened the door just wide enough to step out. Zipped my coat to the chin, folder under my arm. Savannah smiled like she hadn't tried to erase me from existence 3 days ago. Isolde, she said, tone syrupy brittle. This is Mr. Harrow. He represents our family. I looked from her to the man. We're not family, Trent Harrow cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the next steps regarding the Camden Hollow property. I raised a hand. Let me stop you right there. If you're referring to the house Corbin and I lived in for nearly a decade, the one I refinanced under my name, the one I'm still paying property taxes on, then no, there will be no next steps. Savannah folded her arms, her voice dropping into that matriarchal condescension she used so well. Isolde, darling, Corbin left no will. That house is part of his estate. As next of kin, we have rights. I'm his mother. Lila is his sister. We're just his wife, I said evenly. The only legal spouse he ever had. Trent adjusted his clipboard. Even so, without a testamentary document to clarify distribution, I'm so glad you're here. I interrupted, holding the folder to my chest. Saves me a trip. I pulled out the document just enough for the title and letterhead to show. Black ink on thick cream stock. Post-nuptial agreement. Executed and notarized. Savannah's face twitched. This was signed 3 years ago, I said. In the event of his passing, all shared assets, including that house, transfer to me. Trent leaned in slightly, eyes narrowing. May I see that document? No, I said calmly. You'll receive a copy from my attorney through proper channels. I've already retained counsel. For the first time, Savannah lost her balance. Not physically, just a slight drop in her smile. Her fingers tightened around her coat lapel. You're bluffing, she hissed. That paper means nothing. Corbin would never. He did, I said. And he signed it, because he knew you. Savannah stepped forward. You don't get to win this. You were never part of us. You stole him, turned him into this ghost of a man who painted walls and fixed gutters. You dragged him into your soft little southern world and made him a man who finally breathed, I said coldly. A man who laughed, slept through the night, grew marigolds in the backyard instead of ulcers. Her voice dropped to a whisper edged with venom. You were nothing more than a placeholder, a moment. I tilted my head. Then why are you so desperate to steal the house he left to me? She couldn't answer. I turned to Trent. You've just committed unlawful entry. You changed locks on a property not legally yours. You tampered with personal belongings. And you tried to intimidate me off-site with a false claim of inheritance. Trent took a step back, visibly uncomfortable. Mrs. Yu, we should go. Savannah didn't move. I took one step closer. You think this is about the house, I said. It's not. It's about control. You spent years treating Corbin like a trophy you lost. And now you want to punish the one person who loved him without condition. You can't keep me from the funeral, she snapped. I already did, I replied. You're not on the list. I removed you Tuesday morning. Her jaw clenched. You vindictive little— No, I said quietly. Not vindictive. Just done. Then I turned and walked back into the motel door, clicking shut behind me like punctuation. She could bang, she could scream. But I had the only document that mattered. And tomorrow I'd have a court date. 2 days later, an envelope slid under the motel door. No stamp, no knock. Just there. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. My name typed cleanly across the front, Isolde Vance, respondent. Inside a petition from the Chatham County Probate Court, filed by Savannah Yu. The words blurred for a moment, but I forced myself to read them all. She was challenging the validity of the post-nuptial agreement on the grounds that Corbin had been under mental distress at the time of signing, and that I had allegedly coerced him during a period of neurological decline. I dropped the letter like it burned. Coerced, she was saying I manipulated him, that I preyed on him, that I took advantage of the man I loved to steal a house. It wasn't just the accusation, it was the erasure. She wasn't fighting over brick and timber. She was trying to rewrite who Corbin was. I picked up the phone and called Moira. She answered on the second ring. I figured you'd call, she said. She's saying I forced him to sign it. That he wasn't well, I whispered. Voice shaking, Moira didn't flinch. It's a common move. When they don't have evidence, they sling suspicion. She wants to take everything I said barely above a breath. She wants to undo all of it. She wants control, Moira corrected. This was never about money. I sat in silence staring at the motel ceiling where the paint peeled like tired skin. And then I remembered something. Corbin. One night after dinner, he'd said I have a checkup at St. Michael's next week. Neurology. Just to rule stuff out. I hadn't gone with him. He told me not to worry. I leapt off the bed and tore open my suitcase. Dumped everything, the folder, the old receipts, cards from the hospital, unopened mail. Then, inside a pile of documents I hadn't touched in weeks, I found a sealed envelope from St. Michael's Neurology Clinic. My hands shook as I tore it open. Dear Mr. Drexler, following your recent cognitive assessment, we are pleased to inform you that your results fall within normal range. No signs of early decline or neurological impairment were detected. Dated 3 months before his death. I laughed. Not out of joy, not madness. Relief, sharp and cold as winter wind. Corbin had been fine, and now I had proof. The next morning I took the letter and drove through the still sleeping streets of Camden Hollow. Moira met me at her office, hair in a bun coat, already off, coffee in hand. She looked at the letter and nodded. This is our firewall, she said. That afternoon my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in over a year. James Harding, Corbin's former business partner. Hey Isolde, I don't want to get involved, but Savannah reached out. She asked about Corbin's mental state. Wanted to know if there were any signs. Confusion, forgetfulness. She even brought up that investor lunch, you remember, the one where he forgot where he parked. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I remembered that day. He'd come home pale, shaken, said he forgot the name of the guy he'd just met. Blamed it on stress, caffeine. And now Savannah was fishing. Trying to string together fragments of nothing into something malicious. Moira called again that evening. We're filing a response. With the letter, with the mortgage records, and with your payment history. She's building a story, I said. A story where I'm the villain. Moira's voice was steady steel under velvet. Then we build a wall taller than her story can climb. I looked out the motel window. A slow rain tapped against the glass like fingers I didn't want to name. She's not stopping, I said. She'll try everything, let her, Moira replied. Just make sure you keep your documents dry. And your anger aimed. That night I folded the neurologist's letter and slid it back into the folder with the Postnup. I looked at Corbin's handwriting again. If she tries anything, show this to your lawyer. He knew, and now. So would the judge. The courthouse on Montgomery Street felt colder than winter. Steel benches, marble floors. Echoes of whispered accusations and echoing heels. I stood outside the building with both feet planted, folder tucked under one arm. My coat was buttoned to the neck. Not for the weather, but for the armor. Moira met me on the steps. No makeup, no smile, just focus. You ready? She asked quietly. I am, I said. And I was. For the first time in days, I was. Inside, the courtroom wasn't full. A few rows of observers, mostly silent. On the front bench, Savannah Yu draped in black lace, a tissue in one hand, like a theater prop. Beside her sat Lila Chin. Tucked down veil, pinned just right. Their lawyer, Trent Harrow, stood near the plaintiff's table, flipping through notes, clipboard gleaming under courtroom lights. I didn't look at them. Moira and I sat at the respondent's table. I unclenched my fists and took one long breath. Then the judge entered. She was in her 60s, hair, silver glasses, balanced low eyes, unreadable. She called the session to order, and Mr. Harrow stood first. His voice was practiced, measured, concerned, the kind that tried to sound like justice, but smelled faintly of manipulation. He called Savannah a grieving mother, said her actions were not hostile but protective, painted Corbin as a son who may have been vulnerable in his final year, used phrases like mental distress, emotional instability, questionable capacity. He never said the word coerced, but he didn't have to. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Savannah dabbed at her eyes once, right on cue. Then it was our turn. Moira stood slowly. No theatrics, no pity, just precision. She laid out the notarized post-nuptial agreement, highlighted the clause granting Isolde full rights, to all jointly owned assets in the event of Corbin's death. Presented mortgage documents proving that payments had come solely from Isolda's accounts for over 2 years. Then she placed the neurologist's letter on the table, slid it forward with one perfectly measured breath. The courtroom stilled. Moira spoke one sentence. "This letter, Your Honor, is dated 3 months before Mr. Drexler's passing. It affirms he was of sound cognitive function at the time of all legal decisions, including the Postnup." The judge picked it up, read it silently, then looked back toward Trent. He faltered. "Even so, Your Honor," he began. "We must consider the possibility of emotional manipulation." The judge cut him off. "Do you have evidence, counselor, medical records, testimony from a licensed professional? Any documented signs of diminished capacity?" A pause. "No, Your Honor." The gavel didn't fall, but her voice was final. "Then I see no grounds for contest. The post-nuptial agreement is binding. The deed is in Mrs. Vance's name. The property and its contents legally belong to her. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile, I just exhaled. That long, deep exhale, the kind your body forgets how to release until it finally can." Savannah didn't move. Lila kept her eyes down, but I could feel the heat burning off them like steam off scorched pavement. Outside, the sky had cleared. The air smelled of rain on brick. Moira and I stepped out of the courthouse, silence stretching between us like something sacred. I didn't expect Savannah to follow me, but she did. Heels clacked across stone as she caught up on the courthouse steps. Her jaw was tight, eyes glassy, but not from crying. "You may have won the house," she said, voice thin as glass, "but you'll never erase me. I'm his mother." I turned slowly, looked her in the eye. "You erased yourself," I said. She blinked. "What, you erased yourself the moment you broke into our home? The moment you tried to rewrite who Corbin was? The moment you lied to a judge?" Her face cracked, but only slightly. "And if you ever come near me again," I added my voice, "even I won't need a courtroom to stop you. I've already filed the restraining order." She took a single step back. "You can't stop me from his funeral," she hissed. I didn't even flinch. "I already did," I said. "You're not on the list. And if you show up, they'll escort you out." For a moment, she just stood there. Then she turned and walked away like a woman who'd never been told no in her life until now. I stood on the courthouse steps, a loan folder still in hand. The sun warmed my shoulders for the first time in weeks. It was done. Legally, finally, undeniably done. But deep down, I knew Savannah wouldn't vanish. She would try one more time. And next time, it wouldn't be behind a lawyer. It would be behind a veil. The chapel smelled of lilies and cedar polish. It was Tuesday. Exactly 1 week since Corbin's heart gave out in the cardiac unit. The service had been scheduled for noon, but by 11:15 pews were already filling friends, neighbors, a few old clients who'd driven in from Charleston, others from as far as Atlanta. Some hadn't seen us in years, but every single one of them greeted me the same way. "I'm so sorry," they said softly. "He loved you so much. He always talked about your garden plans. He said you were the only calm he ever knew." I nodded. I smiled when I could, swallowed the lump when I couldn't. Moira arrived just before 11:30, quietly taking a seat near the front. Not as my attorney today, but as a friend. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The urn sat near the altar, wrapped in a deep blue velvet cloth, Corbin's favorite color. And then I saw them, 2 silhouettes slipping into the back pew. Subtle, practiced, morning clothes like costumes. Savannah in a pillbox hat, Lila in matching black eyes, downcast. They weren't on the guest list. They had been explicitly removed. I stood frozen for just a moment. Then I felt it, not rage, not even grief. Something colder, heavier, a line being crossed again. Moira turned slightly. "Want me to handle it?" I shook my head. "No, I'll do it myself." I rose from the pew and walked down the aisle. My heels echoed against the wood. Every head turned. The musicians stopped mid-phrase. Even the minister stepped aside. When I reached the back, Savannah looked up with that same practiced poise. "You're not supposed to be here," I said quietly. "We're not leaving," she said, voice low, chin lifted. "I gave birth to him." "Then you should have respected his wishes," I replied. "I'm his mother, and I'm his wife, the only one he chose." She straightened, ready for more, but I didn't raise my voice. "This isn't mourning," I said. It's performance. And if you don't leave now, I'll walk out and take the minister with me. I'll finish the service at a parking lot if I have to. But you don't get to use his death for dignity you never earned. Silence. Then finally Lila's voice. Mom, she said softly. Let's go. Savannah didn't move at first, but slowly she followed. There was no shouting, no grand scene, just the sound of 2 pairs of heels walking away, and the soft click of the chapel door as it closed behind them. I turned back toward the altar, and for the first time I said goodbye to Corbin, not surrounded by venom, not interrupted by lies. Just me. And peace. The day after the funeral, the house was silent. Not soft silent, not sacred, but watchful. Like the walls were waiting for me to crack. I stood in the kitchen wearing Corbin's old sweatshirt fingers, wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The garden outside was bare, just dark soil, and the ghosts of last year's tomatoes. Somehow that felt right. I turned around slowly, half expecting to see him at the table, humming off-key, legs kicked up like always. But the chair was empty. The silence was mine now. 3 days passed. I spent them cleaning, moving room to room, touching every surface Corbin once touched. I found the gardening notebook he'd used, pages filled with sketches, scribbled names of seeds, and little notes like sun hits, hardest at 3 p.m. or mint spreads fast, like secrets. One envelope was taped to the inside cover. For Iz. One day when you're ready. I wasn't ready, but I went outside anyway. I dug where he marked, turned the soil, planted marigolds and mint, watered the dirt gently, sat beside it until dusk. And when I came back inside, there was another envelope. No stamp, no return address, just plain white paper slid under the front door. Inside 6 words, typed. This house will always be mine. No name. But I didn't need one. Savannah. I didn't feel fear. Or even anger. I laughed quietly, almost kindly. Then I walked back outside with the letter. I dug a shallow hole beneath the marigold bed and laid it in, poured soil over it, mixed in fertilizer, packed it tight, not as an act of vengeance, as compost. Maybe something good would grow from it. I brushed the dirt from my fingers and whispered into the soil, "You don't haunt me anymore." Then I went inside, made tea with cinnamon and milk, because Corbin always said grief needed something sweet. Spring came early that year. The garden outside, once just raw soil and scribbled plans in Corbin's notebook, was starting to stir. Shoots pushed through the dirt, stubborn and green. Marigolds bloomed first golden orange like little fires rising from ashes. Each morning I sat beside them with coffee in hand, wrapped in Corbin's flannel shirt. I didn't rush the days, didn't explain the silence, didn't apologize for needing space. Savannah never came back. Not a letter, not a car parked across the street, not even another knock. Whether it was the court order or the garden, or maybe just the truth finally sinking into her, I didn't know. I didn't care. She had become a past tense. I painted the guest rooms sage green, took down the sterile photos she'd put up, replaced them with pictures of me and Corbin at the Lake of Max, our old dog of sunrises we once watched in silence. I reopened my interior design business. Small jobs at first. A widow who wanted her kitchen to feel less like his. A young woman who'd left her fiancé and wanted her apartment to finally feel like hers. They didn't know my story, but I saw pieces of it in theirs. I designed like I was planting, carefully, with intention, with warmth and boundaries and color that no one else got to choose. Then one Saturday morning, I received a letter in the mail, a check from the funeral home, a short card inside. "You handled everything with grace." No name, but I knew the handwriting. Lila. I tucked the note into Corbin's garden notebook. It didn't change anything, but it was something. By June, the marigolds had exploded into full bloom, bright enough to burn. I sat barefoot beside them one evening, sun on my cheeks, dirt under my nails, and I whispered the final truth aloud. I didn't win because I took anything from her. I won because I didn't let her take me. The wind rustled. The chimes on the porch sang a crooked little song, and somewhere in the hum of summer, I could almost hear Corbin laugh. They say grief fades. It doesn't. It shifts. It folds itself into your routines, into the mug you drink from, into the way your hand still reaches across the bed, into the radio static between songs. But the woman I was before she's gone, the woman who smiled through insults, who gave up rooms, who kept quiet so someone else could feel louder, she died with Corbin. And in her place, I planted something else. Not revenge, not bitterness, roots. The garden behind my house isn't tidy, it's alive, wild with rosemary, mint, and hope. And sometimes when another woman in the market asks me, "How did you get through it?" I tell her the truth. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. And sometimes, the softest place in your life is the one you fought hardest to keep. This house is mine. This voice finally is mine. And I'll never hand it over again.